The Sterling Grand Hotel was more than just a building. It was a monument to ambition, elegance, and precision. Its towering glass facade reflected the city skyline like a mirror, capturing the golden hues of the morning sun and the faint bustle of traffic below. Inside, the lobby was a symphony of marble, polished wood, and the faint scent of fresh flowers that mingled with the aroma of finely brewed coffee. Guests hurried through the space, their footsteps soft against the gleaming floors, their voices a low hum blending with the soft strains of a grand piano playing somewhere in the background. Among them moved Richard Sterling, the hotel's owner, a man whose life had been built on vision, discipline, and a relentless pursuit of perfection. At 47, Richard's presence commanded respect. His dark suit tailored to perfection, his hair meticulously combed, and his sharp eyes constantly scanning every detail of his empire. But behind the confident exterior, a quiet emptiness lingered, a subtle ache that no amount of success could fill. Richard had grown accustomed to the rhythm of his hotel, to the flow of guests, the efficiency of staff, and the polished beauty of every corner he had meticulously overseen. Yet despite all his accomplishments, there was a void in his life, a space that no luxury could occupy. The laughter of children in the lobby, the gentle smiles of couples checking in, even the polite nods of the housekeeping staff, none of it reached the part of him that longed for connection, for family, for something real. He had once known love, fleeting and bright, but it had slipped through his fingers, leaving only memories and a lingering regret that he rarely allowed himself to acknowledge. On the other side of the lobby, moving with quiet diligence, was Tanya, a woman whose life had been a delicate balance of resilience, hard work, and hope. She was a housekeeping staff member at the Sterling Grand, and her days were filled with the endless task of cleaning, organizing, and ensuring the hotel met the impeccable standards its owner demanded. Tanya's uniform was neat but simple, her movements precise yet unhurried, revealing a woman accustomed to responsibility and aware of the subtle dignity in her labor. Trailing behind her was her daughter Maya, a lively and curious 8-year-old, with eyes that seemed too large for her face, sparkling with intelligence and wonder. Maya's small hands clutched a worn notebook, a treasure she carried everywhere, and her steps were quick yet careful, never straying far from her mother. Maya's fascination with the hotel was almost palpable. She had grown up in this world of polished surfaces and polite interactions, yet it never failed to enchant her. She would pause in the corridors to watch the sunlight scatter across the marble, to listen to the soft murmur of guests, and to study the small details others overlooked, the intricate patterns on a carpet, the delicate carving of a banister, the subtle scent of fresh flowers that seemed to follow her from room to room. And it was on one such day, as she wandered through the lobby under her mother's watchful gaze, that Maya first noticed Richard Sterling. He was standing by the concierge desk, reviewing documents with a meticulous hand. The sunlight from the large windows cast a golden glow on his features, highlighting the sharpness of his jaw and the intensity of his eyes. Maya, curious as ever, paused and stared. Something about the way he carried himself, the calm authority in his movements, and, inexplicably, the warmth that seemed to linger in his eyes, struck her deeply. She felt an unexplainable pull toward him, a sense of recognition she did not understand. Her tiny lips parted, and almost without thinking, she whispered softly, a single word that carried the weight of innocence and destiny alike. "Dad?" The word floated through the air like a fragile note, delicate yet piercing. Richard looked up sharply, his pen halting mid-motion, as if the world around him had stopped. He blinked rapidly, unsure if he had heard correctly, but there was no mistake. The voice, the tone, the face, it stirred something deep within him that he had not felt in decades. The resemblance was uncanny, almost impossible, and yet undeniable. Maya's eyes, wide and curious, mirrored his own in a way that defied logic, and her small smile carried a familiarity that he could not dismiss. For a moment, Richard simply stared, frozen, a mix of shock, disbelief, and a long-buried yearning flooding through him. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was impossible, that this was coincidence, that the human mind was prone to seeing patterns where none existed. Yet the truth pressed upon him relentlessly. He had seen that look before, that exact tilt of the head, the subtle curve of the lips, the spark in the eyes that spoke of unspoken thoughts and quiet intelligence. And somewhere in the deepest recesses of his heart, he felt the undeniable pull of a connection that he could no longer ignore. Meanwhile, Maya's eyes searched his face, sensing something familiar, something safe and comforting she could not yet name. The lobby, the bustling guests, the gleaming chandeliers, all faded into the background as she waited for a response. The world seemed to hold its breath, suspended in that single fleeting moment where two lives, separated by circumstance and time, began to align. Richard slowly lowered his pen and took a hesitant step toward her, his mind racing, memories he had long buried, of a love that had been brief and bright, of promises made and broken, of a child he had never known, flooded back with an intensity that left him almost breathless. The weight of regret of years lost pressed upon him, yet alongside it came an unfamiliar surge of hope. Fragile and tentative yet undeniable, Maya, unaware of the storm she had unleashed, tilted her head slightly. Curiosity mingled with the instinctive feeling that something monumental was unfolding. The connection between them was palpable, unspoken, and yet profoundly real. Richard's mind struggled to process the impossible. That this child, standing before him in the grand lobby of his own creation, could be the daughter he had never known. The living embodiment of a past he thought was lost forever. As the moment stretched, Richard's heart began to open, cautiously, hesitantly, to the possibility that fate had orchestrated this encounter. He knelt down slightly, bringing his eyes closer to hers, searching for confirmation, for recognition, for a sign that this was not merely imagination. Maya's gaze held his, steady and unwavering, filled with a mixture of wonder, innocence, and an inexplicable certainty. For the first time in decades, Richard felt something he had not allowed himself to feel in years, the stirring of a father's heart, awakened by a single simple word that carried a universe of meaning. The world continued around them, the sounds of the hotel drifting past like distant music. But in that moment, nothing else existed. There was only Richard, Maya, and the fragile, luminous thread of connection that had been spun across time and circumstance, finally drawn taut. After that brief, astonishing moment in the lobby, Richard found it impossible to focus on his work. For the first time in years, the meticulous spreadsheets, contracts, and hotel operations lost all significance. His thoughts kept returning to Maya, the uncanny resemblance, the way her eyes mirrored his own, the way her small hand had brushed against her notebook as she whispered that single word, "Dad." Days passed, and Richard began to notice her in small, quiet ways. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She moved through the hotel with an unassuming curiosity that reminded him of the way he himself had explored the world as a child, wide-eyed and eager for discovery. He watched her from a distance in the lobby, noticed how she tilted her head while observing the chandeliers, how she lingered by the concierge desk as if trying to understand the flow of people and life around her. Each gesture, each look tugged at something deep inside him. Richard found himself taking moments during his day to leave little things for her, a book she had been glancing at in the hotel's small library, a set of colored pencils she had admired on the concierge desk. These small acts were anonymous, silent, yet they became a daily ritual. He never approached her directly at first, fearing that any overt action might frighten her or worse, drive her away. Instead, he allowed his presence to linger in subtle ways, watching her reaction to these small tokens with a mixture of nervous anticipation and quiet hope. Maya, for her part, began to notice the subtle changes. A new book would appear on her bed, a pencil set left carefully on her table. She felt an unexplained warmth in these moments, a sense that someone was watching over her, someone who cared without ever intruding. Her small mind couldn't put words to it yet, but she began to look for the man she had whispered "Dad" to, scanning the lobby in the mornings, feeling a strange, comforting pull whenever he appeared. Tanya observed this new dynamic with a cautious eye. She had seen Richard's attention, though she couldn't yet tell whether it was mere curiosity or something more meaningful. She had learned to protect Maya, to shield her from the disappointments of the world, and she remained wary. But even Tanya could see that Richard's interest was not fleeting. He lingered, not in judgment but in quiet attention, a subtle consistency that set him apart from the people who often passed through their lives, leaving nothing but empty promises behind. One rainy afternoon, as the hotel's grand glass doors reflected streaks of silver light, Maya wandered near Richard's private office. She was fascinated by the room's grandeur, the heavy oak desk, the towering bookshelves, the large windows that looked down upon the bustling city streets. She pressed her small hand against the glass, watching Richard move through papers and plans, entirely unaware that she was there. Her curiosity got the better of her. She turned the handle gently, surprised to find it unlocked, and stepped inside. Richard looked up just as she entered, and his breath caught. There she was, small and soaking from the rain, yet her eyes held the same sharp curiosity he remembered from their brief encounter in the lobby. For a moment he simply stared, unable to speak, as if the universe had slowed to allow him to take in the impossible sight before him. "Mr. Maya's voice trembled slightly. Do you live here?" Richard's throat tightened. He knelt slightly, bringing himself closer to her level, trying to mask the tidal wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. "No, sweetheart, I just work here," he said softly. "Why are you here?" "I was curious," she replied, tilting her head. "Everything here is so big, so shiny. It makes me wonder what it would be like to belong somewhere like this." Her words, innocent and unguarded, struck a deep chord within him. They were simple, yet they carried the weight of a longing he had never fully admitted. To be part of a family, to matter to someone, to belong. In that moment, he realized that his life of luxury and control had never filled the void that a child's love could. He wanted to speak, to reach out, to tell her everything, but the fear of disrupting her small, fragile world held him back. Instead, he simply nodded, offering the warmth of his gaze. Maya, sensing a kindred presence, felt safe enough to step a little closer. The bond that had begun with a single word now grew silently, threading its way through the quiet moments of observation, the small acts of attention, and the invisible understanding that had begun to form between them. Over the next few weeks, Richard's life became entwined with hers in subtle, quiet ways. He left little notes for her, books and sometimes small trinkets that she would find in her room. Maya began to wait for these small gestures, her heart lifting with each discovery. Richard, in turn, felt a growing sense of responsibility, a stirring of protective instincts he had never expected to awaken. It was no longer enough to simply observe. He wanted to be present, to guide, to nurture, to make up for the years he had lost. Tanya noticed the change in her daughter's demeanor, the small smiles that came more often, the lighter step in her movements. She couldn't yet understand the depth of Richard's feelings, nor did she know the history that bound them. Yet she felt a cautious relief. For the first time, someone of integrity and kindness had taken an interest in Maya, and it was not the empty, transient attention she had seen before. Richard, meanwhile, began to confront the memories of his past. He remembered a fleeting love, a woman whose laughter had once brightened his life, and the child he had never known. He had walked away, leaving promises unfulfilled, consumed by ambition and circumstance. Now in this hotel lobby with this small, curious child who resembled him in ways too perfect to ignore, he faced the chance to right a wrong that had lingered for decades. The silent dance of observation and small gestures continued, each day building upon the last. Richard's presence became a constant, a quiet reassurance that Maya could sense even if she could not fully understand. And in those moments he discovered something he had long forgotten: the simple, profound joy of caring for someone who truly needed him, and the realization that life had offered him a second chance to embrace what he had once lost. It was a fragile beginning, woven with uncertainty and hope, but it was real. And in that reality, Richard Sterling began to understand that the heart's capacity for love, redemption, and connection could never be measured by wealth, status, or accomplishment. It could only be lived, moment by moment, gesture by gesture, word by word. The days turned into weeks, yet Richard could not shake the image of Maya's face from his mind. Every time he walked through the lobby, her presence seemed to linger in his thoughts, like a shadow he could neither chase nor ignore. He began to notice small details that made her more human in his eyes. The way she absent-mindedly twisted a strand of hair while thinking, the way her eyes widened at the smallest marvels, and the tiny gestures of compassion she showed toward the housekeeping staff, who had become her surrogate family within the hotel. Each observation made his chest ache with a longing he had never allowed himself to feel in decades. Richard realized that watching from a distance was no longer enough. He wanted to speak to her, to interact, to establish a bond that went beyond silent gestures, and yet he was plagued by doubt. What if Tanya misunderstood him? What if he disrupted the fragile life they had built together? What if Maya, in all her innocence, felt betrayed by a stranger claiming a place in her life? It was a rainy afternoon when the opportunity presented itself. Maya had wandered near the hotel's small library, drawn to a book she had never seen before. Richard followed quietly, keeping his distance, observing her excitement as she discovered the colorful pages. He stepped closer, offering a soft smile that startled her initially. "Would you like me to read it to you?" he asked gently. Maya's eyes widened, a mixture of curiosity and tentative trust flickering across her face. "Yes," she whispered, nodding slowly. For the first time, Richard felt the joy of guiding her through something as simple as a story, and yet the weight of it was immense. With each page, each shared laugh, each gasp of surprise from Maya, he felt a connection solidifying, a connection that had been missing from his life for far too long. But Richard knew that actions, not mere presence, were necessary. He needed Tanya's approval, her understanding, before he could openly take responsibility for what fate seemed to have given him. He requested a quiet meeting with her one evening, in the small staff room that had always been a sanctuary for Tanya and Maya. Tanya arrived cautiously, her expression wary. She had noticed the subtle changes, the books, the small gifts, the warmth in Richard's eyes, but she was still unsure of his intentions. Richard took a deep breath, the words he had rehearsed countless times in his mind finally finding their way to his lips. "Tanya, I need to speak with you about something important. I believe Maya is my daughter." For a long moment, Tanya simply stared at him, disbelief flashing across her face. "Your daughter?" she whispered, her voice trembling with both hope and skepticism. "Yes," Richard replied, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know this may sound impossible, and I understand if you don't believe me. But there is something in her eyes, her expressions, her very being that I cannot ignore. I want to be part of her life if you allow me. I want to make up for the years I've lost to be the father she deserves." Tanya's mind raced. She had protected Maya fiercely, ensuring that no one could hurt her or take advantage of her innocence. Yet looking into Richard's eyes, she saw sincerity, a depth of feeling that was unmistakable. Could she trust him? Could she allow the possibility that this man, who had seemed so distant and imposing, could truly become part of their lives? "You understand," she said slowly, "that this isn't just about words. Actions matter." Maya has already been hurt by promises that went unfulfilled. If you truly mean this, you'll have to show it. You'll have to prove that your heart is in the right place every day. "I will," Richard vowed, his voice firm and resolute. "I don't expect forgiveness or trust immediately, but I promise I will not give up. Maya deserves more than I ever realized, and I will spend every day earning my place in her life." A quiet tension filled the room, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the window. Tanya studied him, weighing her instincts against her hope. Slowly, a small tentative smile appeared on her face. "Then let's see," she whispered. "Let's see if you can truly be the father she needs." Richard felt a surge of relief and determination. This was not the end of the journey, but the beginning. A fragile bridge had been built, connecting past regrets with a future full of possibility. He had taken the first step toward redemption, and he would not falter. In the days that followed, Richard became a consistent presence in Maya's life, no longer just a distant observer, but an active participant. He accompanied her on walks through the nearby park, reading stories at bedtime, helping with schoolwork, and teaching her the little lessons he had learned about life, kindness, and resilience. Each day was a new opportunity to prove himself, to show that love was not just a word but a practice, a commitment, a daily choice. Maya responded in kind, her initial curiosity blossoming into trust. She began to look forward to Richard's presence, anticipating his quiet guidance and the warmth he brought into her small world. The bond between them grew steadily, strengthened by shared experiences, gentle encouragement, and the slow revelation of a father's love long delayed but no less profound. Even Tanya, cautious yet hopeful, began to relax. She watched as her daughter's laughter grew more frequent, as her eyes sparkled with joy that had been absent before. She saw the consistency in Richard, the genuine care, the way he anticipated Maya's needs and respected her space. It was not immediate trust, but it was progress, a fragile, precious beginning that hinted at the possibility of a family finally whole. And in this quiet unfolding of daily life, Richard realized the profound truth he had long avoided, that redemption, love, and connection were not measured by wealth, power, or status. They were measured in moments, small, deliberate, heartfelt moments that build bridges where none existed before. And in Maya's laughter, her curious eyes, and her gradual trust, he found the beginnings of a bond that would endure, a second chance that life had granted him when he had almost given up hope.